Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Arts Consortium. We are so glad to have you here. Michael, would you like to make our introductions?
I don't know, do I?
Yes.
Sure, why not?
So, for anybody who doesn't know, Michael Krebs is the president of the board of directors of the Arts Consortium.
You know, everybody wants some money at one point. You guys are gonna tell us how to do it. So we're all pretty excited and happy to see all the new faces here. From some of the well, let's have at it.
Excellent. Yeah, so for those of you who have never been here before, you are sitting in the Peter and Carrie Gallery of the Loft at Fort Visalia, which is managed by the Arts Consortium. So we're very happy to have you here. If you look at us on Instagram, we do go by Peter and Carrie Gallery because we want to make sure that this space is acknowledged for that name and that people know where they're coming when they arrive. So welcome. If you again didn't know, this whole installation was a project between Self-Help Enterprises, the Arts Consortium, the City of Visalia. In the back, we have our partnership with the Tulare County Health and Human Services Agency. So this was not really just an Arts Consortium effort, it was an entire community's effort to honor what was here before and set something up to provide for our future. And so thinking about our future, we have these wonderful folks from the California Arts Council who have taken time out of their busy schedules to come and answer the questions that we may have about their grant application process. If you noticed, their grant season is open. And so hopefully you've done some research and looked at something that worked for you. And hopefully you've registered beforehand through their web portal so that you are in line to have your questions addressed. I do believe there will be a question and answer period at the end. So if you didn't register, you may still get an opportunity to speak out. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Gabrielle Rosado, Jonathan Estrada, and Megan Morgan. You can go for Antonio. Being here, everybody, welcome. You can go. My name is Jonathan Estrada. I am an arts program specialist and I use team programs.
And hi everyone, I'm Gabrielle Rosado, also an arts program specialist, and my pronouns are she, her.
And before starting, I'd like to bring us into the space of the land and people acknowledgement. This is the standard California Arts Council land and people acknowledgement. The California Arts Council acknowledges the original inhabitants of the land now called California. And that California continues to be home to many indigenous communities. Generations of tribal communities develop deep understandings of the land and continue long-standing relationships with the land, water, air, plants, and animal beings through ceremony, culture, and stewardship. These communities are not only an important part of our history as contemporary Californians, but are also important voices in our understanding of this place. And acknowledging the violent history of the founding of the state of California, its illegal state-sponsored genocide, the misrepresentation of indigenous peoples and their culture, and the erasure of the contributions to our shared history, we at the California Arts Council recognize our responsibility to these indigenous communities, and we are compelled to support tribes, private organizations, and related organizations, including arts organizations, in their efforts to uplift indigenous people and communities. With these ideals in mind, we recognize today that the California Arts Council is a statewide organization with staff and council members residing in numerous occupied territories and tribal nations, and that we are wholly competing on the traditional homelands, the Tachi Yoruba people of the San Joaquin Valley.
All right, so thank you, Jonathan, for that wonderful land and people's acknowledgement, and thank you all for welcoming us into your space and city. We're so excited to be here with you today. As a quick note, in terms of space, the bathrooms are located right down the center hallway, and exits are to our left, your right, just in case. And additionally, we have a lot of handouts and bits of materials that you might have already seen on your way But those are all for you to take, so please take them as you wish, and if people, people that were able to make it today, take it and share it with your community, we want to make sure it gets out there. The slides for this presentation will be posted online, so don't be too worried about having to take vigorous notes. And then we also have a virtual version or recording of this presentation that's posted on our website as well, if you want to revisit it or share it with anyone else who might benefit from the information shared today. So we want to get to know each other a little bit, so we're going to do a quick icebreaker. If folks are willing and able, if you can raise your hand if this is your first CAC event you have attended in person. Wow, awesome. All right, that would make sense since this is our first time doing in-person workshops since like 2019. But thank you so much for joining us here today. All right, so raise your hand if you've ever been awarded a CAC grant before. Wonderful. All right, so for all the others, those are the people you might want to connect with. They might know how to get the money, and obviously we're going to share with you how to successfully apply for our grants too. Do we have any arts administrators? Raise your hand. All right, and how about individual artists? Wonderful, welcome. All right, so hopefully that'll give you a sense of who's in the room. We want you to take the opportunity to meet each other and network if that makes you feel comfortable, and just get a sense of those possible connections that you have here today. Okay, and some last minute housekeeping. At the end of the presentation, we'll share a QR code for a feedback survey. We very much want to hear from you about, what went well and what we can improve on. We still have, I think, like 10 more that we're doing across the state. So we are, taking in that feedback and adjusting as we go. One of those things being snacks. So thank you so much for offering snacks today. And we also have a paper version for you to fill out as well, and you can leave it for me. All right, so a quick overview of what we'll be covering today in this evening's workshop. We're gonna take a quick look at who is the California Arts Council and our grant cycle. We'll go over general eligibility. We'll give an overview of all of our open grant programs. We'll talk about some resources, our guidelines, and our grant manual. We'll go into depth about all the application elements. We'll give you some grant writing tips, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. So before diving deep into the grant specific portions of this workshop, let's start with who we are and what we do at the California Arts Council. So the California Arts Council, also known as CAC, is a state agency established in 1976. Our mission is to strengthen art, culture, and creative expression to help build a better California for everyone. Our agency's work is guided by the vision of a California where all people flourish with universal access to and participation in the arts. Our funding is decided by the governor and the legislature, and it comes from the state budget under local assistance. The CAC is led by an 11-member appointed council that sets policies and makes the final decisions on the grant awards. So on this screen, you'll see an image showing our annual grant cycle. So it starts with the council holding public meetings to set funding priorities and policy goals, and then they vote on which grant programs can open. Staff then develop the grant guidelines and the grant applications, and we also start recruiting and coordinating panels of peer reviewers. So everyone here in this room could be a panelist for the California Arts Council. And we can tap into that later on in the presentation. So once that application window opens, which is where we are right now in the grant cycle, CAC staff launch technical assistance and office hours and outreach services to help Californians apply for these grants. After the grant deadline, staff then send eligible applications to panelists to review and rank the applications. And then staff use application ranks to provide different funding options based on the available funds in council's stated priorities. The council votes on final funding decisions at a public meeting. And then staff work with grantees to complete contracts and continue supporting those grantees through the grant activity period and through final reporting. And something we want you to keep in mind is we do what we can to support as many grant proposals as possible within our local assistance budget, which is decided by the state. So here's some general eligibility for eligible applicants for CSC grants. So applicants must be a 501c3 nonprofit organization, a unit of city or county government, or work with a California-based nonprofit fiscal sponsor. So anyone who is not part of a nonprofit organization or doesn't have one registered, not to fear, you can work with a fiscal sponsor, and a fiscal sponsor are nonprofit organizations that receive the state funds and basically loan their 501c3 status on behalf. So you can get that money, and then they usually take a fee, and then they disperse the rest of the money to you. California Native or Indigenous tribal governments are also eligible applicants. All applicants, including fiscal sponsors, must be based in California and have at least 2 years of arts programming history and/or services. Our grants that are open this cycle for 2025 are for organizations only. So re-granting opportunities from our administrative organization will be available in 2026. And this mostly applies to individual artists and culture bearers. So if you're an individual artist, unfortunately, you cannot apply to our grants that are currently open, but we do have re-granting programs, which we will go over. And those programs will open in early to mid 2026, and then we would apply to those to receive direct funding. And then in addition to these general eligibility requirements, each grant program has some specific eligibility requirements. So you want to make sure we review the guidelines for the program that you're interested in applying for to make sure that you're meeting all of those requirements.
I'm going to briefly review each grant program and its general purpose. You can find comprehensive information for each grant program on our website. CAC grants can be categorized into one of 4 types. The first is general operating, second is private support. We also have administrative organizations and partnership support. There's a QR code at the bottom, which will take you to a list of all of the grants. But if you don't have time to click on it, it'll be available online. So under the general operating support category, we have the general operating support grant, sometimes referred to as GEN or GEN. This is a new program, and it consolidates past CAC general operating programs, including the statewide and regional networks, cultural pathways, and arts and cultural organization general operating support. The purpose of this program is to direct funding to arts and cultural organizations in support of ongoing operations, prioritizing small organizations. The maximum request amount is $30,000, and there is a matching fund restriction. It's a one-on-one match requirement for organizations with a total revenue above $250,000. Total revenue restrictions, there are revenue restrictions for 2 different organization types. So the first is an arts service / networks organization. These are organizations with primary purpose of providing practical services for artists, creators, culture bearers, and for arts and culture organizations. For example, if you're previously eligible for SRN, which is a state regional network, your organization would fall under this category. There are also arts service / network organizations with total revenue of $5 million or below. Those are the ones that can apply for this. The arts service / network organization, the total revenue of $5 million or below can apply. The second organization type is arts producing or arts presenting organizations, which are organizations with a primary purpose of creating or exhibiting artistic or cultural work, and or cultivating arts learning. Arts producing or presenting organizations with a total revenue of 1.5 million below can apply. And the program specialist is Leslie Giovanni. Under project-based support, we have the Impact Projects Grant, or PRJ. The Impact Project supports arts organizations for collaborations between California-based artists and community members to address the community-defined need. Projects must use artistic practice to respond to issues experienced by historically and systemically under-resourced communities. Projects for this program should use the arts to create positive social change in their community. The maximum request amount is $25,000. There is no matching funds required for this grant. Organizations with total revenue below 3 million can apply. There are some restrictions. So with project-based grants, it's kind of like a long carrot. And there's like a dip in the middle of the table. That's all the funding. So if you dip it once, let's call this the Impact Grants project, you can't dip it again for the arts and youth. Because that's double dipping, and that's like putting your whole mouth in the bowl. That's just selfish, am I right? Let's share the dip around a little bit here. So that's the Impact Projects Program Specialist is Natalie.
Awesome, thanks, Jonathan. So the next project support grant we have is Arts and Youth, or also known as AAY, or like what we like to say, AAY. So the Arts and Youth Grant is a new program this year. For the 2025 cycle, the council voted to consolidate all of CAC's previously offered art education and youth-focused grants, which include arts in school, arts integration training, art education exposure, jumpstart, and creative youth development. Those are all of those programs, if you're familiar with them, that got consolidated into this plan. So the purpose of the Arts and Youth program this year is to support meaningful arts participation and learning in diverse settings and contexts. For infants, children, and youth aged 0 to 25 by prioritizing programs that directly bridge barriers to access and participation. All types of projects previously funded by individual youth-focused programs are eligible to apply under this umbrella program. The maximum request amount will be $25,000. There's no matching fund requirement, and as Jonathan mentioned, you can either apply to this Arts and Youth or Impact projects. You can apply to both. Now, the program specialist is Emily Towner. So next we have our administrating organization grants. So administrating organizations, or AOs, we love acronyms at the state. These are larger grants for a smaller number of organizations who are responsible for regranting CAC funds throughout the state or designated region. So our first AO program is called Individual Artist Fellowship, also known as IAF. And this program will identify 8 administrating organizations to develop an individual artist fellowship program in their region. So this map, it's really small on the screen, but you can see the 8 regions. And I believe we're in this Central Valley region right here. So the AO identified for this region will be the one facilitating the fellowship program, and the individual artists would apply to them for funding. So as I mentioned before, individual artists are not eligible to apply through this opportunity, but will be able to apply to the AO in their region in 2026. The maximum request amount differs by region, with the baseline amount of $300,000. And we took a per capita approach, so that just means that the funding is tied to the population of that region. So LA, as you can see, is its own region because they have such a large population. Matching funds are not required for this grant, and fiscally sponsored organizations are also not eligible for this opportunity. And I am the program specialist managing this program. Our next AO program that we have is called Folk and Traditional Arts, also known as FTA. So this program supports the culture bearers practicing folk and traditional arts across California. The CAC will award one or possibly more AOs to develop a program and administer funds statewide in support of these cultural expressions. The awarded AO will provide opportunities for artists, cultural bearers, and cultural organizations through grants, technical assistance, and/or capacity building efforts. Once the AO is selected this fall, these opportunities will likely be available in early 2026, and all of that information will be updated on our website as those programs become live. The maximum request amount for this program is up to $1 million each year for 2 years, so a total of $2 million. Matching funds are not required, and fiscally sponsored organizations are not eligible for this opportunity. The program specialist is Ariel Rubin.
Finally, we have our partnership grants. We have the state local partners grant. And the SFP program is how the California Arts Council works with one official arts organization in each county to bring arts programs to local communities. In fact, we worked with them to bring this workshop here today. Thank you, Emily. And these organizations, they're usually local arts agencies or nonprofits, are chosen by the county's board of supervisors, and they act as the main arts contact for their region. Because of that, qualifying organizations have already been identified, and the grant application is by invitation only. SLPs receive state funding for things like arts education, cultural events, support for local artists, and programs that reflect the unique needs of their area. The maximum request amount is $75,000. Match funds is 1-to-1 for organizations with TRs above $1 million in the most recently completed fiscal year. There is also one limitation to this it might not be up there, but if you are an SLP, you can't apply for general operating. That's not going to apply to most of you here. We have a couple here that I want to move this. I am program specialist, Jonathan Estrada, and we also have the state local partners mentorship grant. We use this to have longstanding SLPs mentor new SLPs until they're ready to be on their own. The mentorship program is only available to current SLPs. Because of that, the candidates have already been identified, and we're just talking about it until we have. Maximum request amount is $50,000. Matching funds are not required. I'm also a program specialist in this. And that is all the grant programs we have open this year. So if any of these programs tie to your interest and you'd like to apply, please note that all grant applications have to be submitted by 11:59 on June 5th. That's 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, June 5th. So that means you're going to be doing it like at the end of May, right? Internet can go down, electricity can go down. Look at California, we're in budget crisis. They might do a rolling blackout or something like that. And also there are no exceptions. Like even if my mama had an art organization, and she was like, I really gotta do this, and it's 11:58. I'm sorry, and I love my mom, but there are no exceptions.
All right, so now we're going to review some key resources and elements that you should be aware of to apply successfully, and we have a lot of them. So our applications are only accepted online through our online application system. It has many names. What you interface with is called Smart Simple. We also call it GMS or the grants portal. So in order to apply, new applicants must register their organization in the portal first. We do have step-by-step instructions on how to register, and we have 2 resources. So if you're inclined to read, we have written step-by-step instructions on our grants manual. And for the specific page, it's page 16. And if you're more of a visual learner like me, you can watch a video titled Grant Applicant Website and Registration Overview Video. And someone walks you through how to register. Both can be found on our grant resources page, which we have a QR code for you to scan later in the presentation, but also if you're on the website, it's just called grant resources. If you're a returning applicant, those same resources can be used to help certify your organization, which is done on a yearly basis. And that's to ensure any updates such as your business, mailing address, or any staff contacts, staff turnover is very common. Just want to make sure all of that is captured, so when you're applying, it's an accurate snapshot of who is working with your organization for this cycle. And then we have, as I mentioned, our 2025 grants manual. So this is a comprehensive guide to our entire grant application process, and it covers each step from applying to our panel review process, and lastly to managing your award. And this 2025 edition features some important updates about eligibility requirements. It has our required fiscal sponsor agreements in there, updated contacts and more, and it's also available in Spanish. So our grant guidelines are basically your one-stop shop for any particular program. So in those guidelines, it provides an overview of key information to help you prepare a strong proposal. So we recommend you read the guidelines in full before starting your application. And some key sections I want to highlight is we have our program timeline in there. So the whole timeline from when your report would be due, to when you can anticipate receiving funds, to when your grant activity period will end. It's just all neatly in there in a chart. You'll also find program goals, the project requirements, and the application questions and review criteria. So if you haven't already registered and you can't access the application online, you can find those questions in the guidelines.
Before we dive into the application elements, let's review some general budget requirements. The CFC's definition of total revenue is the total cash inflow from your organization's most recently completed fiscal year. Cash inflow / income includes all earned income like ticket sales and contributed income, which comes in the form of grants, donations, one-time funding, or operational grants. Regranting and pass-through funding are excluded from the organization's total revenue calculation for eligibility. So basically that means if you're given a grant and then you take that money and then give it to artists, that's a re-grant. So you don't have to include that as part of your income. If your total revenue is above 250,000 and you're applying for multiple CAC grants, please remember to keep the total grant request amount at 50% of your total revenue from the past fiscal year. For example, if your TR is 300,000, then the total sum of the requested money cannot be more than 150,000. Plus you. All programs have maximum request amounts. Be sure to observe this amount in the guidelines and design your proposal, including your budget accordingly. Please keep in mind that the maximum request amounts are just requests, so it doesn't mean that's the amount that you're going to get if you end up winning. Actual awards will be determined in the allocation process, and that depends on the county ranks and the CAC's final local system budget. We're not getting into like next month. The CAC offers grant programs that require a dollar for dollar match to support the award program. That means organizations must raise an equivalent amount in funds or in-kind contributions. Eligible match sources include earned income, donations, and grant funds from other public or private funding organizations. State funds are not allowed in that. Support can come from in-kind sources to meet the match fund requirement. In-kind contributions are non-cash donations provided by third parties for which monetary value can be determined. And honestly, you can determine that amount. Somebody donates a piano, and you can do the lowest cost if that's what helps the application. Or if it's actually a really fancy piano that maybe just needs some repairs, you can go for the higher end. And we are just kind of trusting you to put a price on those kind of donations. So that can come in the form of property, space, pro bono consultancy, trading, or services. Organization volunteers as well comes to that. and others that are blocked, given free of charge to the organizations. For additional information on in-kind contributions, we do have an in-kind contributions document, and it's available as a linked PDF from the guidelines and also on the grants resource page. If you haven't figured it out yet, the grants resource page is going to be your favorite thing about this whole writing learning. Organizations that are awarding grants that require finance should work with their internal finance team to review the CAC and state requirements to track and report matching contributions. We also have some hard copies with us today at one of those two tables. And for two of our programs, must be below $5 million, and total revenue for arts producing or presenting organizations must be below $1.5 million. For impact projects, total revenue must be below $3 million.
And really quickly, that 5 million and 1.5 is only for the general operating support grant.
But
Right.
it is all than Rob. Joe's cash and stuff. You know what I'm saying?
All right, so now we're gonna look at the basic elements of our application. So it's important to note every program has slightly different application questions, so you can review those questions in the guidelines. And in the application, you will be responsible for the following. Your organization's information, so all of the, basic fodder, like your address, who you serve, things like that. We'll have various quantitative questions. Then we also, if you're fiscally sponsored, you'll have to provide your fiscal sponsor information. Something that is new this year in 2025 is the CAC provided letter of agreement template is required to be used by fiscal sponsors and the applicant organization. Failure to use the CAC provided template would result in an ineligibility. And then also part of the application, we have narrative questions that talk about the project design, timeline, the community intended to be served, and your organization's commitment to accessibility and equity. And then lastly, we have budget tables. Fun. So all applicants will complete a 2-year budget snapshot table listing a minimum of 2 years of revenue and expense totals. There is a notes text field that accompanies this table, and that's where you can explain any surpluses or deficits. For all our project-specific grant programs, you would be required to fill out a project budget table, and it includes things like personnel, operating, production, and accessibility and accommodation expenses. So basically, what do you plan on doing with the money once you get it? How are you going to execute your project? And then lastly, if you're applying for a program that has a matching fund requirement, you will be required to fill out a matching table showing the sources where you intend to draw your matching support from, again, 1-to-1. And we totally understand that things change from applying to a grant to actually executing it to then the end of it. So when you're filling out this matching table, you are disclosing where you're intending to get these funds from, but that might change. And when you submit your final report, that's when you will actually put in, where that funds came from. So if it differs from your application, that is totally fine. There's no penalization for that. And the program specialist who manages any of these matching fund requirements, who, is your resource to walk you through those things. And then lastly, part of the application, we have support materials. So support materials may include artistic work samples, letters of support or testimonials, and examples of your organization's work overall. You'll want to make sure that all your support materials are recent and relevant to the project proposal. Clearly feature and identify lead artists. You want to choose a medium that best fits your proposed project outcome. So for example, if you're working in a performance discipline, consider submitting video files for your artistic examples. All organizations are limited to 5 support materials. Each file type has instructions on length and format. When I say file type, I mean like PDF versus Word doc versus JPEG, all of that. Additional support materials that exceed the requested length would not be considered by the panelists. You want to clearly label your work and give the panelists the relevant contextual or medium information in the support materials note field. So essentially, why is the panelist looking at this support material? An important thing to remember is support materials will not receive higher or lower ranks based on their production quality. So for example, a video taken on the phone is just as great as a video that was maybe highly produced by a production company, and we train our analysts on this. And then finally, at the certification, the last page of the application, each applicant has to certify that they are in good standing with the Secretary of State, also known as SOS. And this is just to ensure that we can pay you.
All right, so let's go over some of the things that the CAC cannot fund. You can find a full list of what we do not fund on a document on our website, and it's called What We Do Not Fund. It's also linked to the project budget section of the grant application in some symbols. And here are a few of the common questions that we get. But yeah, definitely check that list to get a full list. So ineligible applicants include for-profit, again, this is ineligible applicants. For-profit entities, including LLCs, are not eligible, even though it's sponsored. Individuals are not eligible, but please check back for when the regional IAF and FMC programs are looking for application. Parent-teacher associations or PTAs and booster clubs are ineligible. There are also some ineligible activities and items, fundraising, lobbying, projects with religious purposes, construction projects, purchases or maintenance of land and buildings, equipment purchases, but equipment rentals are food and drinks, and out-of-state travel. Now, I know some of your ears might have perked up when I said fundraising and lobbying. You can do that, or we just can't fund that. All right, and yeah, so we can take a quick break, 5 minutes. Welcome back. All right, so now we're going to dive into the last half of the class of our presentation before we go to Q&A. This year, the council has set specific funding priorities. These priorities are for general operations, GenOps, impact project, and arts and youth. The 2 funding priorities are for first-time grantees and small organizations with annual total revenues of $250,000 or less applying to the programs I mentioned. The third funding priority is support for organizations serving communities in the lower quartiles of the California Healthy Places Index, or HPI. The HPI is a tool that maps data on social conditions that affect health, things like education, job opportunities, incomes, housing, air and water quality, and more. So we end up asking you to provide the zip codes for the programs that you serve, and we use that to determine which HPI quartile your organization is. The priority is on zip codes in the lower 2 HPI quartiles, those with a percentile ranging between 0 and 49. These areas include many rural, remote, and lower resource communities, as well as neighborhoods in cities. These are areas that have been historically and systemically underserved, and this focus helps promote greater geographic equity across the state. And a reminder that these 3 funding priorities only apply to the 3 programs that are listed on the screen: the general operating support, impact projects, and arts and youth.
All right, so now that you have all this information about the CFP, our grant programs, and the application information, We want to give you some tips to help you craft a successful grant proposal. So the first tip is know your audience. Your proposal is reviewed by panelists, not CAC staff or council members. These panelists are fellow Californians from across the state, artists, educators, art administrators, and art lovers of all backgrounds. You want to write clearly and directly to them. Second, you want to start with the review criteria. Before you begin, read the review criteria and the program guidelines to shape your responses. You want to make sure you address every part of the question. Sometimes we have multi-part questions. We did a huge audit this last year to cut that out because we know it can be a headache, but some of them still exist. And you want to clearly explain what your project is, how it will happen, and why your organization is the right one to do it. You want to stick to the application. Panelists only review what's in your proposal, so don't assume that panelists know your community or your work. They won't Google your organization and they won't click on any links that you put in there. So if your response to a question is, visit this page on our website, they're not. And you want to give yourself plenty of time. So don't wait until the last minute to register in the grant portal, begin your application, or ask questions. As Jonathan mentioned, lots of things can go wrong, and as we get closer to the deadline, that's when our volume of inquiries go up. And so we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate everyone that we can. So reach out early. Some writing tips is you want to draft your answers in a separate document first. So this can help you stay organized or give you a backup copy, and you can copy and paste your responses into the portal once you're ready to submit. If your project includes a lead artist, you want to make sure that their voice comes through in the narrative. And you want to clearly define discipline-specific terms or jargon. You know, sometimes when you're doing your day-to-day work and you're talking to your community, there's a lot of jargon and words and things that you might use and you assume everyone knows them, but you want to make sure you're defining those, and that will really make your proposal that much stronger. And lastly, know that we want you to succeed. So join our office hours. Each program specialist is hosting virtual office hours, and this is like an informal drop-in space where you can come and ask any questions as it relates to that program. You want to check out our grant resources page. And again, every specialist is there to answer your questions, so feel free to email those emails on every grant program page that exists. And mark your calendars. So the deadline is June 5th at 11:59 p.m. We can't accept any additional materials or information past that deadline, and no exceptions will be made, especially to Jonathan's mother. And it is the goal of the CAC to reach everyone who contacts us. So again, just reach out way before that deadline. And something to note is our office is closed at 5 p.m. on deadline day. So staff assistants won't be available after 5 p.m. So even though you have until midnight to submit your application, the last time you can talk to someone will be 5 p.m. on Thursday, June 5th. So here are some of those QR codes that we mentioned, but again, if you navigate to our website, you'll be able to find them. We have our FAQs, which are frequently asked questions, and staff regularly update those throughout the application window. So if you have a question, chances are someone else might have had it too, so you can check there for immediate assistance. Again, that grant resources page, I'm telling you all, that's going to be a good one. And then our virtual office hours, you can find those times there as well.